Welcome back, beautiful souls. I am so grateful to dig in today with Carrie Rowan. Her clients have dubbed her the professor of happiness and joy, which I think is so cool because it's not just her being like, I'm happy, I'm joyful, but her clients dubbed her the professor of happiness and joy. And what that means is she's really good at teaching and embodying in this space of happiness and joy. So if you're dropping in today, if you intuitively felt called to drop into today's session, you're here for the right reasons because you are meant to learn about how happiness and joy can be cultivated in your own life. And I'm really excited to bring this wisdom into the space with Carrie. So Carrie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina. This is such an honor. I love your work and I love what you do. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. I'm so grateful to be here with you. So I would love to dial it back a little bit. So let's think, because it's like now you're living this life where it's really conscious, you're feeling really like filled with this happiness and this joy, but can we dial it back to a time when maybe you were not feeling that happiness or that joy? And was there some sort of like an awakening or a wake up call that started to bring you on this journey to where you are today?
Oh, definitely. A lot of those moments in our lives, right? But a lot of what my book centers around are the stories in my life, the things that we all have things that happen to us that we wish didn't happen to us. And so, I had some very big tragedies happen in my life, like one after another. And, it really brought me to my knees. And I think it's in those moments when it was completely out of my control. There was nothing I could do about it, and kind of managing through that and understanding that my life was going to be different on a go forward basis. And at the same time, I had two really small children. So I had so many changes happening in my life all at once. And that's really when I really had to dig in deep. I'd studied self-help for a really long time since I was like 11. So it was just part of who I was. And so I dug into that. I dug into my passion to learn and understand what was going on with me and how my life was going to be different. And then also with this new title as mom, and managing these two kids 16 months apart. So it all sort of was like this perfect storm, where I had to find ways to cope because like I said, it was out of my control and there were so many things happening at once. And that's when I really had that aha moment that, wait a second, I really have a choice. And I noticed that the stories that I was saying to myself, the quiet ones inside my head, were making me feel worse about what happened and all the details of it that I would churn over in my mind because our mind is always trying to figure it out. I got to figure this out. Why did this all happen? And there really a lot of times are not those answers. So when I could catch myself in these stories that made me feel worse, that was so eye-opening for me. It was really huge. It's the whole basis of my book, Tell a New Story, based on my own stories that I had to discover through trials and tribulations.
So, wow. So, what I'm hearing you say is those moments that really brought you to your knees. And I think so many people can relate to that. Those moments that really bring us to our knees really have us take a minute to say, how can I stand back up? What are the stories that I'm telling myself? Is that helping me stand back up? Or is that really having me curl into a ball on the ground right now? Like, is that helpful? Because the
Yeah.
stories that we tell ourselves really are either so empowering or so disempowering. And I do this exercise sometimes with my clients where I will have them share the messages that they're speaking to themselves and they write it down and they're like, like all of them, the mean things that they're saying to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually have them look at that letter and read it as if they were going to read it to their child or read it as if they were going to read it to their best friend. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden they're like, that is so mean. Oh my God, I would never say these things out loud. Okay, then why are we saying them to ourselves? Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you bring up such a powerful point of the stories that we're telling ourselves are not supporting us. And so how did you actually make that transition? Because I think sometimes it's like easier said than done. What did that look like for you to
Mm.
actually start shifting the stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. Always easier said than done, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, it took a lot of, incongruence and rocky road, wanting to have your life go a certain way and then having it not, or, not meeting your expectations, all these things that can cause us a lot of anxiety and stress. And so for me, it was really, I remember coming downstairs one night after I put my second born to bed. And she's my little firecracker, right? Everybody has a little
Yes.
firecracker.
Yes.
Usually the second one's a firecracker.
Oh,
And the
good.
first one does not prepare you for that.
Great. My first one's a
I'm sorry to
firecracker.
tell you.
We'll see how this goes then. We'll see how this plays out.
So the second one being the firecracker. So, after her like hour-long bedtime routine that she needed, and I just went downstairs and I just like cry. I just lost it in the bathroom, and I was just sobbing. And it was one of those moments when we feel like we're in one of those dark moments, right? But we're right on the cusp, right? Of a breakthrough, but we just don't know it at the time. And I heard myself say something, this little mantra that I didn't even know I had going on in the back of my head. And the little mantra was, why does it have to be so hard? Why does it have to be so hard? And imagine, if we know what we know about neuroscience, the brain always has to answer us. It always has to answer whatever question you pose to it. So, of course, it's trying to tell me why it has to be so hard, right? Now, this is not the question you want to ask your mind.
Right.
And so when I heard myself, it was such a revelation. I was like, wow. And I wrote it down. I used to journal a lot back then. Every morning I do my morning pages, and I would journal, and I would journal about it. And then I started catching other things. And I was like, well, that's not helpful. I'm asking myself, let me see if I can ask a better question. And
Mm,
because, like a computer, good in, good out, right? So when we ask better questions, we can then get better answers. But for me, I even talk about that. I tell that story in my book because it was just one of those moments that I'll never forget, because I caught myself. And when you can catch yourself in the middle of a thought, that metacognition that we talk about, being aware of what you're aware of, being aware of what that thought is, and then stopping for a second and just being the observer, right? Wow, that's interesting that I'm saying that to myself. I didn't even realize it. Because a lot of times, like what you were talking about, my clients too, they don't realize the stories that they're telling themselves. They don't realize the negative impact it can have on you and everybody around you as well.
absolutely. Yeah. And so you're bringing forward these really powerful tools of one, just observation. Like if we can take a minute to observe the thoughts, because it's like we're not our thoughts, we're the ones observing our thoughts. We actually have a higher level of consciousness than just the thoughts that are coming through. And so it's this idea of like, wait a minute, is that serving me? That idea of why does this have to be so hard? Suddenly, exactly as you were saying, the brain is like, because this, because that, because this, because that. And then we're like, yeah, it is really hard. It does bring us to our knees.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what a tangible example of that hour-long bedtime routine. I think any parent is like nodding their head, like, yep, remember that. But it's that idea of like, and I know this too with being a parent, like the stories, especially about parenthood, that I can tell myself change the way I show up for my child. It changes his energy because he's actually acclimating to my own nervous system in the moment. And it's like, oh, when I can calm mine around this, like everything's going to be okay. Everything's fine. Like there's room for your big feelings and it's not going to shake me up. That's okay. And so I think those moments in time really, really help to observe and also journal. Sometimes that's, like you were saying, a really powerful tool of saying, like, let's say I can't necessarily cognitively catch myself as often as I'd like. Okay, let me just journal. Let me see where I'm at. And then let me start to maybe circle the things that I'm like, wow, that feels a little disempowering. Is there something that's also true that actually feels
Mm-hmm.
better in my body? And
Mm-hmm.
can I shift it to that?
I
Sometimes
love
it's
that.
literally that simple. Yeah.
It is. And the physical act of writing, right? Like it's one
Yes.
thing to type on your computer, but to take pen to paper is
Mhm.
where the magic happens. And as a writer myself and a singer-songwriter, that's where it all happens. It's like you said, it's really bringing it into your body. It's making it something physical. And when we can change, our physicality, our physiology, we can quickly change our mind. So that's why I love journaling. And out of all my journaling came my first full-length album out of that whole period of time that I was going through, which I call polishing your pearls. It's when life throws you the slimy oysters, you've got to get in there and you got to dig in. You got to roll your sleeves up. You got to be willing to get dirty in all those feelings and whatever's coming up for you, because deep inside of there are some pearls, right? And then you have to find those pearls and polish them up. So for me, that was my songs, that was my music. But everybody has their own version of their pearls deep inside of them.
I love that visualization because it's so true. Inside all the grittiness is this beautiful piece of jewelry, this beautiful piece of us that desires to be seen, but we have to go through it first. We have to let ourselves see like what's in the way.
Hmm.
But how do I get to that middle? And I almost like think about it like the onion, like especially for like, let's say brain dump journaling. Those first paragraphs are like the top of the onion, it's just kind
Hmm.
of like whatever it's going to be. And then you really get to the very most internal part of it. And you're like, that's why that's happening. That's where all these other thoughts above them are coming from. So it's a really powerful tool to really drop us back into like, what is the pearl of wisdom inside of all of this like muckiness that's happening right now?
So true. Forget the lemons and the lemonade. Let's get into that oyster, we
Right.
got to get in there
Yeah. Like, let's
because
get
it's not
started.
pretty sometimes, right? And I think we're afraid to go there sometimes, but it was deep within that mess when I could really embrace it, and own what was really happening, and find those beautiful pearls of my songs. And with the hope that, when we can reach deep down inside and share from our heart into somebody else's heart, it goes, and you can make a difference in somebody else's life just by letting them know they're not alone, and they too can feel the same thing and feel better about it eventually.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's like when we can embody it within ourselves, then we're able to help other people do that too, which is so powerful because sometimes people just need an example of what it's like to see someone who's really embodying that happiness and that joy too, to be like, oh, it's possible. And I think what's really cool that you're speaking about right now is this idea of you're not like spiritually bypassing and just being like, I'm just happy and joyful all the time. Like there's actually, like to cultivate the happiness and the joy, that also means feeling our feelings. And so I'm
Absolutely.
curious, yeah, of the people that are like, well, wait, that's not realistic to always be happy and joyful. Or are you spiritually bypassing? Can you share just a little bit more about how you honor your feelings while cultivating this life of joy and happiness?
That's a great, great question, because in this day and age, like, so many people just want to not feel their feelings, right? We're gonna zone out with Netflix, or we're gonna have that wine, or whatever it is that you do to distract yourself. So really being able to own that and feel those feelings, hey, and give them a name. Hey, you know what? I'm anxious right now, or I'm feeling super sad about XYZ. And it's okay. It's okay to not be okay in that moment, and embracing it, because feelings are really just meant to pass through us, right? But they do get stuck in our body and they get lodged in our cells when we don't allow ourselves to feel them. So they're supposed to be passing through like the wind. But when we resist them and we are afraid of them and we don't want to feel them, that's when they do get stuck. So I feel like journaling is a huge way that you can get those feelings out, because a lot of times, I notice with my clients too, is that people aren't really sure what they're feeling. And people also have their sort of level of feeling that they get stuck in, right? Like that they've got the same emotions. If you ask most people, they can name the three or four emotions they typically feel in a day, in a week, in a month, right? So everybody has their little go-to place, their little plateau that they go to. And when you can figure out what those are, we sort of become addicted to our own feelings. So if you can tap in there and ask yourself, what are those feelings? What are they for me? Do I always go to overwhelm when things get bad? Do I go to anxiety? What is my go-to when, the stuff hits the fan? So when you can understand that about yourself, you can start to recognize it in all of its hidden little ways that it's trying to talk to you, and just acknowledge, oh, there's that feeling of overwhelm trying to come in again. And that's okay. I'm going to be okay with that. Maybe I'm going to go for a walk and see if I can find out what that is, and just release it and let it go. But really, I feel like acknowledging it and not trying to ignore it, push it away, or I'll deal with that later, is when we get into trouble. So it's really being present moment awareness with what that feeling is. What do you want to call it?
You bring up such an incredible point because it's that idea of like the more aware we are, the more it's like so much easier for us to then be able to notice, oh, there it is again, And so just again, that journaling, and to your point too, of like acknowledging it and not trying to make it wrong, not trying to make it right, not trying to really make it anything. It really just is what it is, seeing it. And then sometimes where the body desires to move it, that does mean physically move your body,
Mm-hmm.
shaking your body, walking outside, imagining it as it's kind of leaving your feet down into Mother Earth, kind of creating almost like a ritual of that, like where you're just like, okay, I see you. And I really want to release you to understand the wisdom underneath that. Because there's always, like you were saying, that pearl underneath the muckiness. Like there's feelings there for a reason. And our goal is to say, like, okay, what's underneath this? I see you first. Now let's get to what's underneath that.
I love that. And where do I feel it in my body, right? Like for
Mm,
everybody that's different, is there a certain chakra? Where is that for me? Is that here in my third chakra? Where do I feel that feeling? Because we all feel the feelings in a different place in our body. And I think it gives you, like you're saying, a lot of information, a lot of clues about what you do need to release. And I love that what you just explained. I have a meditation where, you picture running everything down your spine like a warm shower, all the negativity back down into Mother Earth. And it just feels really good. I ground my house like that all the time as well, just pulling
yes.
all the negative energy out and down into Mother Earth where she can resolve it and dissolve it for all of us.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're speaking into this because I don't think I've said this really out loud that I do that too. I not only cleanse and clear the energy in myself, but I do it in the spaces that I play in because it's constantly collecting energy from people passing through or that's just kind of energetic stamps are on spaces. So that's a really tangible, easy tip like you were just saying. Imagine it almost like that warm running water moving down
Mm,
through your body, releasing down into Mother Earth. That really all we have to do is just let go and release and allow that to just move through us. And in the spaces where we play a lot, our cars, where we are,
hmm
like really cleansing, clearing that energy, you'll notice a difference, when you do that. Or maybe you do it all the time and then you don't do it and you're like, that did make a difference. Now I'm noticing that I need to cleanse the energy in the
Exactly.
space. Yeah.
And for everybody in the space, right? And anybody who's inhabiting that space as well. And like you're saying, people in, people out, bring other energy there. Kids fight, this creates energy in the space. Agreed. And as a Reiki master, I love just, breaking the room or it's just become who I am. I'm not a
Yeah.
table healer. We've had this discussion befefore, but it's
Yeah.
just who I am. So you don't even realize you're not even consciously doing that all the time. You're just clearing your space, clearing wherever you go. Before you go into a building or if you have to have a procedure, whatever it is, I'm constantly grounding the building. The only time I don't do grounding is when I'm on a plane.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. You're like, let's actually keep this one up in the air, will we? Let's go ahead and keep this one up high. Yeah. But it's fun to channel up there sometimes. Like it feels like sometimes when I'm like meditating, I feel really connected when I'm up there
Mm,
too. It's kind of interesting.
yeah, totally. But I don't find myself using the word grounding at all when I'm up there.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like flying actually. Just, yeah, feeling
Arriving
present.
safely.
Yeah, exactly. I know, right? Just like the awareness of the pilot and the crew.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
best crew, the best pilot ever, right? Or the best
Yes.
doctor, whoever is going to do whatever on you. Maybe you have a
Yes.
feeling, you just put that intention out there to the universe and you can always get a good answer.
Absolutely. And I love that too, like just asking for, let's say, clarity of the crew, clarity of the people on the plane. Let's say, even when you're driving, like I'm so grateful for the clarity that I'm experiencing as I'm driving and for the clarity of all the people driving around me. They're aware of the
Yes.
road, they're aware of the lane they're in,
Yes,
little
they're
things
paying
like
attention.
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I surround myself with safe drivers. Yeah, super
Yeah.
Louise Hay. I feel like we're going to like a little Louise. She would always set that intention before she leaves. Um,
Yes.
so I love
Intention is
that.
everything. It
Yeah.
creates the stories we're telling ourselves matter and they
hmm
create what it is that we're experiencing all around us because that has energy attached to it too.
Absolutely. And the most interesting thing I tell people all the time is, we get what we focus on, right?
Mhm.
Whether we want it or not. And that's the piece because people are like, oh, of course I'm thinking good things. And then, in the next moment, we don't even realize we're in that spiral about something that happened that we wish didn't happen, or
Mhm.
something we said, or we wish we had said, or some argument. So the stuff that we're focusing on is what we pull more of into our lives. But a lot of times we don't realize it's not just the stuff that you want. It's anything that you're thinking about too much. You're just drawing more of that to yourself.
Absolutely. It's that we're manifesting 24/7, regardless of whether or not we're aware of it. Exactly to your point. So it's that idea of it's not just when we're setting intentions. What are we thinking about quite often that actually maybe isn't serving us in any way? And so it's just being more conscious of the awareness of the stories we're telling ourselves. And I really love that idea too of what you were mentioning, being aware of the stories we're saying out loud. I think a
Mm,
lot of women that I know will have kind of this self-deprecating way of speaking about themselves sometimes. And I don't think that it's really serving us as a collective, men or women, of, being like, oh, whatever the self-deprecating thing might be, or
hmm
minimizing or playing small.
hmm
The things we say out loud matter too. And our subconscious mind is internalizing what we're saying and having it really mean something about ourselves. And so I'd love for you to speak a little bit more about that too, about how you're just aware of the stories you're even speaking out loud too.
Absolutely. Because we're always creating. We're creating with our words, we're creating with our deeds, right? And especially when we use the I am statements. The I am statements are so powerful. You have to be really careful with those.
Mm-hmm.
Um, your I am fill in the blank, whether it's positive or negative. A lot of the stories that people will say, I'm so stupid, or I am not capable, or I can't, all those things, fill in the blank. Because I am is like, it's like a direct command to your subconscious because it's
Yes.
always listening. It's always
Right.
listening. So whether you're telling a joke or a self-deprecating story or whatever, it's always listening. And so is the law of attraction. It never sleeps. So that's why it's really important, even on those moments when you think you're not paying attention, you are always putting it out into the universe, whether you want it or not, which is why I feel like I'm not a big venter, right? Like friends who are close to
Mhm.
me, they can vent to me. That's fine. I don't care. But they're always like, egging me on, like, don't you, tell his story or
Yeah.
one of it. But I'm really careful about what I put out into the universe because I'm always creating.
Yes.
And, even, and I'm not denying what's happening, but I don't need to dwell on it and I don't need to keep talking about it to everybody that I see. Right. So I'm super selective about the stories that I tell and when and where I tell them.
Absolutely. It's kind of like that idea of creating a sacred space to understand when we tell the story. Like if we're going to vent, quote unquote, or get the story out to better understand the wisdom underneath it, that pearl of wisdom,
Mm,
stepping into, let's say, a coaching container or something along those lines, or a therapist or a counselor, whatever that could look like, a Reiki master, any of those things. When we are stepping into a space where we know that energy is going to be alchemized, that's the goal of the space. Those are the best spaces to really start to quote unquote vent or share
hmm.
whatever it is that you're moving through, because you know that you're looking for a solution and you're not just trying
Yes.
to amplify the energy, because that's actually what we're doing when we're just venting. We're just amplifying more of that energy, calling more of that in, and we don't even realize we're doing it. And what's really interesting too is our subconscious mind does not know the difference between when we're talking about ourselves and we're talking about other people. And so I think that's a really powerful thing to recognize is, if let's say we are in this pattern of venting and we're like, oh, that girl sucks. Our subconscious mind thinks that that's what we're talking about, ourselves, or that girl is an idiot or whatever it might be. Our
Right.
subconscious mind is now collecting that and saying, I'm an idiot. Right. And it's like, no, no, no one is. Everything's neutral. We're just placing energy in spaces because of the lenses we're looking at life through. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just stories are so powerful. I'm so glad we're talking about this, because
Yeah.
I think 99% of the time people are on autopilot with the stories internally and externally that are happening.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they're a habit. Stories are really
Yeah.
just a little habit. It's the
Yep.
way we tell our life story. It's the way we describe. It's the way we justify why we don't have what we want in life. We have stories that we tell for so many different reasons. And that's why one of the steps in my 5 steps is
Mm.
intention, because you have to look at the intentions behind your story. You got to get clear because sometimes our intentions aren't so pretty, and we tell a story because we want to get back at somebody, or we want to get them over to our side, or we want to elicit help, but we're too afraid to ask, or we're
Mm.
really pissed off and we want, we're going to tell you indirectly. So these are the not pretty sides to telling a story, right? And then we have all these really positive reasons for telling a story. We want to uplift others, which really we are all uplifters. So
Mm.
when you catch yourself telling a story with not such a pure intention, that's when you can stop yourself. You could be, once you start to catch on to this word too, the cool thing is you can be mid story, like it's coming out of your lips and you will pull it back,
Yes.
because you want to be a deliberate creator. And that's, taking everything into account, what you say, what you think, how you act, all those things.
Yes. Yes. I love it. So, if we could even just reverse engineer a little bit. So, we think about that moment in time where you're like, my child's bedtime routine, why is it so hard? To where you're at now. So you talked a lot about some of the things that you've been doing to really cultivate the joy, the happiness. There was songwriting in there. There were other parts of your story that really brought you to where you are now. If you were to kind of reverse engineer how you went from that moment of feeling like it's so hard, you're now being aware of your thoughts, you're now journaling, you're conscious of what you're saying out loud, you're setting intentions. Is there anything else that you feel like that feels like important to talk about the journey you really cultivated to now being in this space of joy,
Yeah.
happiness? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like creativity, you mentioned
Mm,
music and art and writing and, creativity, we're all creative. We are creative as our core, right? I mean, there's no better way to be aligned with our creator than to create yourself, right? We're all here to
mm,
create. And
yes.
so, and it's in those juicy moments, that's what gives us the zest in life. So if you're not creating something, I don't care what it is. Maybe you used to paint when you were little and you have an easel upstairs in your bedroom that you go and do every so often. Whatever it is, creating could be a garden for you, or it could be making a beautiful dinner for your family. However you create, um, is your thing, which is cool. All kinds of creation are will give you that same feeling. But I feel like me going back to who I was as a child, because I was in corporate America for 10 years before that. And when I stepped back into who I was at a soul level, I'll say, um, and did the things that my soul wanted me to do that I just did naturally as a kid, which was to sing, which was to write poetry for people. I don't know why I did that stuff. I just did it. Put on a show for anybody who would stay and watch me. And sing, as I know you did the same thing. And so it's all this creativity that I brought back into my life that reminded me, oh, this is who I really am. This is who I am inside. And when we can find those things that feed our soul, that's joy, right? Joy feeds your soul. It bubbles up within you. Happiness is great too, but happiness can be more fleeting, right? Happiness might be, when you accomplish something, you get something, right? So it's not necessarily, it's not a constancy, as we already talked about. But building creativity into your life and finding the things that give you that zest, that's going to improve every piece of your life. That's going to improve every relationship, especially the relationship between you,
Mm,
meaning you and your higher self, who knows all about you and knows what your intentions are and knows what you want to be and who you want to become. And so it's always improving that relationship. And creativity brings you, like I said, back into who you are. It taps back into your soul. It taps into the creative energy of all of the world that creates universes. And that's where the goodness comes from. That's where the joy is from. That's where you lose all sense of time and space
mm,
when you are immersed in whatever that creative action is. Maybe it's building a Lego with a Lego building with your son. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just embracing that creativity and being in that space, in that moment of pure joy that comes from it.
yes. Yes. And what's really cool about what you were just speaking into about doing the things that we loved to do when we were children, I feel like that was almost that moment in time before we were even telling stories, right? It's like when we're just in
Mm-hmm.
our joy, we're not really telling stories. We're being the embodiment of the story that we are in the moment. And so it's like we're just being present. We're being joyful. We're following what feels like it has flow and expansiveness. And so that's what's really cool is it's like really bringing us back to what we came here to do, which is the thing we grab when we're young, like the paintbrush or the microphone or the stage that we create when it doesn't matter if anyone's looking or not. We're like, I'm still going to be here.
The hairbrush.
Exactly. Oh gosh, yes. Lots of hairbrushes in my childhood. Yeah, hence why we're both probably using microphones right now, right? How
Exactly.
funny.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And it's because, yeah, what you just said, it's who we are at our core. And when we're kids, we don't question that. And it's
yeah.
not been wrung out of us yet. It's not been, socialized out of us. We just are who we are in our purest expression. And we
Mm,
don't really have the mental capacity. We're sponges. So we're soaking everything up. Our brain waves are really just in an alpha, the beautiful state all the time. So we're definitely, we know no difference than to be who we are. Right. So you're right. The stories haven't even evolved in us. The
mm,
disempowering beliefs, none of that stuff is there yet. So that's one of the first things I do with clients is to return them back to who they were as a kid, because that's where the purity is. That's where you can find your joy once again.
yes, absolutely. Oh, yes, I love it. And I loved that quote that you just said earlier where being creative brings us back to our creator, right? It connects
Mm-hmm.
us to our creator. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oof, the whole reason we even dropped into these bodies was to create. We're creating all the time, regardless of whether or not we're conscious of it. So when we start to follow what feels expansive, that's quite literally our energy telling us this is for us. Like keep following that. That feels good. When it feels
Mm-hmm.
constricting, okay, there's energy there, a story there, or it's just simply not for us. Because sometimes it's like, yes, this is for me, but I feel the fear. Okay, that's just energy that needs to be cleared.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like stage
Mm-hmm.
fright or something.
Yeah,
Versus
absolutely.
like, yeah, versus like, oh, it's constricting because I actually really don't want to do this. That type of thing where it's like, I actually, this isn't for me. I don't want to build rocket ships or whatever the thing is that like feel, whatever. I personally don't think I'd want to do that. And so it's that idea of like, that just energetically doesn't feel good, following that energy. And that's really going to start to have be like, honestly, be that one foot in front of the other. Cause it's not like, oh, I have to find my divine purpose right now. It's like daily, just follow your energy one step in front of the other. It starts to really reveal itself, like what brings you joy, and start to double down on those things.
I love that. And being able to be sensitive to that energy, like getting to know yourself so well that
Mm.
you know where you are at any given point in time, right? It's like that emotional scale. Where's your vibration? Because everything's vibration, because everything is energy. And
Yes.
where do you hang out? Like that, like I was saying before, are you way down here? You find yourself in overwhelm, boredom, whatever, way on the lower end of the scale. Well, then it's one little step up that rung of the ladder to joy, because you can't get there from there, right? You can't be
Right.
hanging out in despair all the time and expect to feel this joy. It's a climb up that ladder, but everything that you do in an incremental basis on a daily basis, remembering who you are, doing something that makes you feel joyful, remembering your self care, learning to tell better stories, all these things. Every day you get a little higher, higher, and a little higher. And before you know it, you look back, you're like, wow, 30 days I've been doing these little tiny baby steps. And look how far I've come. Look at how much better I'm feeling on a daily basis.
Mm. And you know what's cool? That visualization of like, the more you're aware of how you're feeling, the more your quote unquote average is going to be kind of lifted every day, where it's like a little bit easier to get back to what feels like now the new normal, which is that higher state of like love or joy or whatever that might be. Or maybe it's just the neutrality, kind of being in the middle there, which can be okay. That's that
Mhm.
all levels are meant to be exactly what they're meant to be. But it's when we start to familiarize ourselves with what it feels like to be in joy, it's easier for us to then go back to that place versus like what
Mhm.
we're sometimes super comfortable with, which is the overwhelm, the fear, whatever our quote unquote default has been up into this point. It's just our default because we've been almost feeding that more and more energy. And it's like all we have to do is kind of take some energy from that and move it over to the other place, start to climb the ladder, like you said, to get us to feel what it feels like. Okay, now this is what that feels like. Now this is what that feels like. Because I think for some people, like, especially if you're in a constant state of fear, wherever it might be, joy might feel so unattainable. And so it's this
Mm.
idea of, like you were saying, one step at a time, get to neutral. Can you start to just neutralize some of that energy first and then move your way up?
Absolutely. One little baby step at a time. It's starting to set that intention, like we talked about before. What is my intention? Do I want to feel better? If your intention can be something as simple as that, I just want to feel a little bit better every day. Then you're telling your brain what's important to you, right? Your RAS, you're like, I love the neuroscience. So you're telling your brain, okay, this is important to me. I want to feel a little bit better every day. So now it knows what to focus on. Now you're going to start looking and you can retrain your brain to look for, well, I'm going to quote my own podcast here, but you're looking for what's good, right? So
Mhm.
every single day you start to retrain your brain because it's so easy for us to see what's wrong because that is how our brains are designed. And I think by explaining that to people that we're all designed that way, you don't have to beat yourself up about the fact that it's so easy for you to be critical and you can find what's wrong and you're focused on that all the time. It's a tiny little shift. Hey, I no longer want to do that. I want to feel a little bit better. I'm going to start looking and training my brain because if you know that everybody's brain just does that naturally, you can be like, oh, hi, brain. Nice to see you, but I got this and keep going with your shift, right?
Yeah.
Identifying it, acknowledging it. Hello, you're here, whatever, doing your job, but I'm going to go over this way because I want to feel better. I want to feel a little better every day. And you start retraining your brain to look for what you want, what's
Mhm.
good, what's working in your life. You ever notice how you can, like, have 10 things that are going really great, but that one thing doesn't go well? And what are we focused on? We're
Mhm.
focused on the one thing. And I always use the analogy of my review, like my music reviews, right? I could have 159 great reviews, but if one person comes on there and says they didn't like whatever, that's going to stick in our craw because that's how our brains work. And we're going to get really fixated on that unless we've already trained ourselves to be able to pivot off of that and look for what's good and focus on the 159 other good reviews in your life.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that I think has gotten made that easier for me is to recognize what people are saying is 100% representative of them and not me. Okay, that's your lens. That's what you believe. That does not mean that that's my truth. Really being able to separate the two, where it's like, I know, let's say if I had a song out, I know that this is incredible. It came from straight from my soul. I absolutely love it. No matter what anyone says, it sprinkles on top because I already feel whole about the experience. I feel so good. It's a piece of my soul. No matter what anyone says, awesome, sprinkles on top, right? Okay, amazing. You love it. Okay, you don't love it. Great. That's where you're at. That's okay. I'm not for you. Amazing. I hope that you find someone that is. And then starting to just really differentiate, that's their thought. That doesn't mean it's my truth. And so just really starting to connect with like, okay, I can exhale on that. Like I don't have to have what other people are thinking be my own. I can really separate the two because I am God creator and I'm creating my own reality based on that as well.
Absolutely. And that you have the choice whether or not to
Yes.
take that in. You have the choice. Like just like you said, that says more about them really than it does to us, but sometimes it does hurt. But I have the choice whether or not I'm going to take that in as mine, become defensive or whatever. I mean, I think this is so pertinent in today's society, right? With so much division between people, and understand that that just is where they are at that moment. And it doesn't have to be my truth. It's so empowering to know that I have the choice how I want to react to that. That I can take back the control, take back the reins and decide, I'm just going to respond. I don't have to do a knee jerk reaction, which used to be my old programming.
Yes.
I can choose a new way to react.
Yes, exactly. And I find the only time it really stings is when there's a part of me that agrees with them. Like if someone says something that I just know is so out of left field that I'm like, that is literally not true. It doesn't sting. It's neutral. It's like, okay, that's where you're at. But if someone says something that I slightly believe or I'm slightly fearful of already, that's the only reason why it stings. All that tells me is I have energy there that I get to heal. That's it. That's mine. That's empowering. I don't have to change the other person. They're just mirroring to me what I get to heal within myself. So then you start to get your power back too, where you're like, okay, now I know where the work is for me. Amazing. Thank you, stranger. User number 19745.
I love that. And equally as true is the flip side of what you just said. So when we see something and we're enamored by somebody and the work they're doing, we've got them up on a pedestal and they have all these incredible qualities, it's because we recognize that same thing in ourselves. Right? Just the opposite of what you said. It also works on both ends. And that's because we recognize it and we know we have that inside of us. And it's also a clue to cultivate more of that in ourselves because we love that. We admire that. And our soul's like reminding us it's longing to be that again.
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you brought that up because the days of the pedestal are over. If you are ever recognizing something beautiful within another person, something you deeply admire, exactly as you said, the only way we recognize it is because we have that within us. That's the only way we can consciously be like, I know what that is because I embody that. And all you're wanting to do is maybe amplify that even more. You're starting to recognize, I love that about that person. I recognize it because it's within me. What if I started to try that on a little bit for size? What if I started to amplify that energy within myself, the confidence, whatever it might be that you're admiring? And just trying that on, even if it's like from an alter ego perspective, let me just pretend to be this person for a minute. All we're doing is amplifying the energy that's already within us and showing up, quote unquote, as them. It's like when you think about Beyonce coming out on stage as Sasha Fierce. Yeah. It's like, wow, she already has that within her.
Right.
Just calling it something different because it allows our brain to wrap itself around that energy. So it's just those little brain hacks that it's like, let me try on that energy, see how it feels. It was there all along. We just have an example of maybe how to amplify it, what it looks like, what it feels like.
I love that.
So true. My goodness. Well, if you could think of, let's say, any tangible exercise that you think would be really supportive for someone who's wanting to really amplify the joy, the happiness in their life, would it be some of the ones you mentioned before? Is there like an exercise, maybe a daily practice that you do that really drops you back into happiness, joy? Or maybe it's not even a daily practice. Maybe you're like, once a quarter, I do this. What would be something that someone could actually do, let's say today, that would really set them forward on that trajectory of creating more joy?
I love that question. Well, I always have my clients set up a non-negotiable morning routine, Why? Because we all need a reminder, right? We're humans. Even I do. After doing this work for so long, I still need my morning routine, right? I like to look at my little 3x5 cards with my little mantras and what I remind myself of and who I am and what I'm becoming and, what my intentions are. And then I meditate because I feel like meditation is really where we're cultivating that relationship that I said before between you and you, that relationship between me and my higher self, my creator, whatever energy you want to call that. And I'm spending that time in silence too. So anything that needs to come up, it can come up for me. It can come up and be recognized. And I think meditation is super important, whether people, I mean, you don't have to get really crazy about it. You can find a type that works for you, any kind of meditation, even if it's 5 minutes, but it gives you that moment in time to really reflect and have the space. You're just creating space. And when you create that space right there, what it's actually doing is improving your life, right? It's like, as they say, you're practicing off the mat, right? It's when you take your yoga off the mat. It's when you
Mm.
take that meditation off the mat, because when you create that space, it's literal space inside of you. It's like a wave of calm, and you can
Mhm.
call on it anytime you want throughout the day. So when the stuff hits the fan, because let's face it, it always does at some point, you have those reserves. You already worked on it. You already built it up, and it's cumulative, just like stress is cumulative in the wrong direction. And
Mm.
I call it your emotional backpack gets so overfilled that it's going to just burst. And the same thing happens with the good stuff. Meditation is cumulative in all the right directions. So over time, you get stronger and you get stronger and you get better at dealing with life and making those choices and how to respond instead of those knee jerk reactions, those patterns that are so deeply rooted in our subconscious. And that's really how we get back to who we truly are and what our life is meant to be like, because it gives you just that moment to reflect. Because in this world of being externally faced, everything's external facing, our phones, our cars, our houses, our kids, everything. We're always looking to the outside. We need to find that quiet space for ourselves to really focus inside. And I think we talked about this before and really feng shui the spaces of our minds.
Mm. Wow, I love the visuals that you paint the picture of like that backpack. I can literally feel those days where I was just it's overflowing. I have things sticking out from all sides and it's like, yeah, all I had to do was empty out the backpack. And it's like when you do those meditative morning routines or just even taking like you were saying 5 minutes in the middle of the day or whatever feels like you can fit it in just to bring in some sort of calm into the body. It's like it's almost like you're taking off the backpack like you were saying. It's like feng shuiing the mind where you're starting to actually place things where they're meant to be and just create space because all this is doing is creating space for you to connect with what's my actual divine truth.
Mm.
Because oftentimes, like you were saying, we're reacting to the external. This has you take a moment to come inward. Like, what's actually true here? Let me pause. Let me take the weight off. Let me start to have this beautiful energy move through me in a way where sometimes all I have to do is receive the words that someone else is saying. Have that be a guided meditation, or sometimes it's just silence. The first moment of silence all day, creating that for yourself to just be like, maybe a message will come through, or maybe it's my first moment of silence, and that's all I needed to just calm my nervous system for a second.
Mm. Oh,
We'll
yeah.
create what we need in those moments.
Yeah, I love that. It's so good for calming your nervous system. And I like to tell people it's really just like, shutting the windows down on your PC. You've got all these
Mm.
windows open, 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 open. And sometimes, people say they don't like it because it brings stuff up. It makes them think about something they might not want to think about.
Mm.
But all that's really asking you to do is just, call it up and close the X out of the window, call it up and X out of the window so that
Mhm.
your operating system can work better. Everything is better. Your whole life becomes better. Your relationships improve. Your sex life improves. Your
Mhm.
relationship with your kids, your ability to manage your own emotions. Everything improves when you take that time in the morning to meditate. And maybe it's for you going on a meditative walk, whatever works for you, just setting aside that time for yourself and being
Yes.
really diligent about it and protective about that time for you.
Yes, yes. And to your point, computers need a restart. Of course, we as human beings need a
Mhm.
restart. So why not have it be how you're setting up your day? Have it be really intentional, like you were saying, because that energy is now outward facing for the rest of the day. And so that really is such a beautiful, pivotal time because the rest of the day is ahead of you. And now you've set that intention of how am I showing up today? What am I identifying as? Those little 3x5 cards, like you were saying, like, who am I today? What alter ego am I stepping into that I actually already am? I just needed that little reminder. Oh,
Hmm.
yeah, I am this person. And now
Hmm.
I'm reacting to the things around me as that version of me versus like I haven't thought about it and now I'm just losing it, you know? And it's like, oh, wait, I'm calm, I'm collected, I am,
Right.
compassionate for how other people are showing up in the world. So, yeah,
Yeah.
wow, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So,
Awesome.
where are you hanging out? So, if someone wanted to connect with you, where could they connect with you? What are the best places for them to find more and more of you? Because I know this was so helpful for people and just the tiniest tip of the iceberg. There's so much more you have.
Oh, thank you. Well, find me on Facebook at Carrie Tunes on Facebook or my website at carrierowan.com. You can find everything linked there. You can find my podcasts and my um, episodes in there. You can find all sorts of great resources. I've got a free gift on there. You can find me on Instagram. All my links are on my page as well. But go to carrierowan.com, sign up for the free gift. It'll give you some ways, and I'll share with you my 5 steps to release your negative stories and bring more joy to your life because that is why we're here.
Absolutely. 5 easy steps. Absolutely do that. We would love to know what were your biggest takeaways from today. Feel free to take a screenshot of this, tag us on Instagram if that feels good for you. You guys know I am Christina Deering. And then what's your Instagram too? So they could tag you and just give your biggest takeaway.
Sure. It's Carrie Rowan, author. It's
Yes.
CarrieRowan, author. And yeah, connect me with me there. That would be fabulous.
Yes. Yeah. We would love to know what your biggest takeaways were, how you're going to start implementing this, or just drop by, say hi. Thank you so much for leaning in today. I hope you got just even a nugget of wisdom on how to bring in more joy, more happiness. Carrie, thank you so much for being here. And listeners, thank you so much for dropping in today. We're sending you so much light and love. Until next time.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina. Be well.